Radical Resilience, the intersection between Western medicine and spirituality.
Angel Heart Radio programs should not be used to replace your legal or medical advice, nor your own sound judgment. In truth, nothing can dim your magnificence. You are a divine spark, a universal light. You are here on purpose. You are part of a divine plan. And it's our joy to support you. We're here to celebrate you. Welcome to Angel Heart Radio. Powered by love, Angel Heart Radio is brought to you by AngelLight777.com.
Great news, everyone. Angel Heart Radio is now live streaming on our Facebook page, and we have a fully searchable, brilliant podcast platform for you at angelheartlisten.com.
Welcome, everyone, to Angel Heart Radio, to a Divinely Ordered Life podcast. I'm your host, Deb Goldberg, and it brings me great pleasure to be here with you today. And it's an honor to serve you in the highest ways that I can by bringing you messages of divine love and blessings for your life. You are dearly loved and cherished and blessed. We have a great show for you today, and I have Dr. Henry Kahn with me. I'm so excited to talk about radical resilience. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Deb. It is a great honor to be part of your awesome radio show and enter the realm of helping people beyond kind of the standard medical model of helping.
Well, thank you. I know it is a joy for me to have you here. I want to tell you a little bit about Henry before we get started. His work history includes 8 years of private practice in Berkeley, California, 10 years in the UCSF Division of General Internal Medicine as a clinician educator and director of UCSF Student Health and Counseling Services for 14 years. He has successfully used resiliency techniques in his patient care and has given lectures on resilience since 2007. Henry has been on the clinical faculty teaching at UCSF since 1980, and currently he's a medical consultant for UCSF Nursing Practitioner Program and a faculty facilitator for an education program. Henry teaches resiliency skills through speaking and coaching and has been a certified high-performance coach since 2015. I'm so grateful to have you here, and you have an amazing story that I can't wait for our listeners to hear. But Henry, why don't let's start with this story. Let's let people know how you got here today and how radical resilience became something that you're so passionate about.
Well, thanks. I would say all of this started when I turned 4 years of age. My mom gave me a Superman cape, and I was convinced that I had now become Superman, and it was kind of an awesome thing for a while. And I knew that I was destined to help people in need. Both my mom and my brother Robbie seemed to need some help, so I was there to offer it. And I had this plan on how I was going to learn to fly, because the first time I put the cape on and jumped up, nothing happened. So I had this plan of climbing on the concrete steps going from our house down to the backyard. About 4 steps down, there was a square concrete platform. The direction of the steps changed, and I would jump from that platform onto the grass. My mother was not happy about that, and she kept saying, "I don't want you jumping." I said, but Mom, my plan is each time I jump, I go a little further, and I haven't hurt myself. you know, and I'm flying. I'm going, you know, this, and I hold up my hand. I jumped this far yesterday, and today I jumped this far past the bottom steps. So I'm on my way. She said, I don't want you to do this. And I didn't really fully understand that, but she said, I don't want to see you doing this. If you keep doing this, I'm taking your cape away. So that, of course, meant to the 4-year-old, make sure she's not looking when you're jumping. So she was looking through a window that had a screen on it when she finally came out and took the cape away. But the reason that she gave me was not about me injuring myself. She was worried about Robbie injuring himself. And my brother Robbie was 2 years older than I, so he was 6. And he had, at the time, I didn't, to me, he was a perfect brother. We never fought over toys. He's always laughing. He was always kind, playful. And I don't think he ever stepped on a bug that I can remember. He just was this delightful, wonderful, perfect brother. And he also, so I really loved my brother Robbie, and, you know, would take him on my expeditions in the neighborhood. And people would kind of laugh at him because he looked a little funny, and he talked not very much, and he walked a little funny. But it was so strange because when people were laughing at him, he'd laugh back. And so I was learning a lot from Robbie. And one of the things I learned to do with Robbie was to teach him how to talk. He wasn't talking much when I became aware at age 4. So I developed ways to teach him. And it's kind of interesting in retrospect. Robbie learned one-word sentences. He would kind of grunt and then say what he wanted. Toy. Cookie. Bedtime. And so he would communicate that way. And so I got very good at patiently teaching him these things, and everything, you know, life was good. When I was 12 and Robbie was 14, he he pushed my mom one day. He was going through puberty, presumably. I had never seen Robbie act in anger in any way, but apparently he got angry and pushed her. She didn't fall down, she didn't get hurt, but she happened to mention it to the doctor. And the next thing I knew, and that she knew, and that my dad, who also was a doctor, knew, they were recommending he be put in one of the local mental institutions. He had severe Down syndrome. And at that time, there were no programs for helping people with Down syndrome or other developmental diseases and conditions. And so he was taken out of the house and put in a local mental hospital, where he stopped talking and pretty much stopped eating. And it was December 7th that my mom came home in the year that I turned 12, came home, and she was very upset because he was turning blue in the hospital and no one was paying any attention. The doctors weren't paying attention. The caregivers weren't paying attention. The staff wasn't paying attention. She was very upset. And I didn't know any, as a 12-year-old, I didn't know much about what was going on. Actually, I was in a pretty good mood. It was December 8th. That morning, I still remember making myself some scrambled eggs and a piece of rye toast with butter and some orange juice, and I was getting ready to dive into all that when my parents came downstairs in our house and said, "We've got bad news. Robbie died last night." And I was so angry. And now my older brother Brian was going to become a doctor. He was a pre-med student at UCLA, and my dad already was a doctor. And I just couldn't understand how doctors could put him in a place where they weren't going to watch him, and then they didn't even seem to care when he was showing the signs that he was on the way out, and they did nothing. So I actually went from a period of time up until 12, I unquestioningly decided I was going to be a doctor because that seemed to be my destiny. But at that point, I said, I don't want to be a doctor. If this is how doctors, if this is what being a doctor is, I don't want anything to do with it. So I was a geeky science kid. I, made explosives in my chemistry set like some of my other colleagues around then. And I almost electrocuted myself with my ham radio construction of devices. And in terms of spirituality, I was raised Jewish. In this 12th year, I was preparing for my bar mitzvah. And I remember the teacher saying, the Jews are the chosen people. And I raised my hand a little bit as a rebel saying, okay, well, which part of chosen includes the Holocaust, which hadn't happened all that long before this was happening, and my brother Robbie dying at age 14. I didn't understand. Tell me why God let that happen. And the answer I got was God works in mysterious ways. And that wasn't quite enough for me, the science geeky kid. So I would have to say I was mostly an agnostic through my life. And that started eroding subtly in different ways over time. When I did eventually, when I had to apply for college, they asked you, what are you planning on doing with your life? And as I put it all together, I loved music. I liked listening. I loved resonance and harmony and all that. But I also just like being with people and helping them out in some ways. So I finally decided, well, maybe I could be a doctor, but I would do it only if I could be whatever the best doctor is. If I could practice in a setting where I'm doing my best work and supported in doing that and moving forward in it, then maybe I could be a different kind of doctor that cared about his patients. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to be a doctor like my brother and my dad. And that was where I was. When I finished during med school, I was starting to get some hints, and this is related to the resilience work. The first hint was first year med school. I gave blood. There's a blood drive, and most of my classmates were giving blood, and I found out my blood type was B positive. Now, God, the universe, source, whoever, there is a sense of humor out there, and it turns out it was a profound message. I didn't realize it at the time, but being positive actually is the essence of resilience, and I'll get more into that later.
Let's just back up a little bit because your story is really pretty amazing. It's going to become more amazing in a little while. But what the journey of what you went through of, not being sure about your faith and wanting to be a doctor and then not wanting to be a doctor because you are looking at things in a more narrow way as a child. It is really interesting to watch the beginning of that and then where you go with this.
Yes. When Robbie died, I wasn't handling it very well. I did get to go see him on weekends. My mom she went every day. She felt horribly guilty. This was a guilt that she carried through to the end of her life. She felt that she was somehow responsible. She was one who told the story about him pushing, and the doctor saying there's no alternative. He's bigger than you. He's stronger than you. He's probably bigger than Henry. I can't even predict, I don't know if he would become aggressive with Henry. There's no way of predicting, and so we have to put him away. And I didn't hear that till later, but I had never experienced any negativity from Robbie. it was absolute pure unconditional love. And when I visited him in the hospital with my mom, again, it was unconditional love. There was no resentment. In fact, when, growing up, I'd go off to camp during summertime, and I'd be gone for 2 weeks. And honestly, I was the only teacher and playmate of Robbie. And he could have been resentful. He could, why were you gone for so long? But no, he accepted that I would be gone, and then he would be absolutely delightful and fun to play with, and laughing and kind and gentle and caring. And that was Robbie. So I was learning a lot about who Robbie was, and he was teaching me in his own way what I needed to know. So if I was going to go out and be the best kind of doctor, I was going to have compassion beyond what most people have, because I watched Robbie have kindness and compassion and unconditional love, and that was really powerful for me.
Beautiful.
So getting into a little bit to the doctoring story, I first, once I graduated from med school, I did all my training and schooling and post-training internship residency and chief residency in internal medicine at UCSF. So I was very familiar with the place. And my first week as a real doctor, you have to work at least a year to get your internship to be licensed in California, but at least I was officially an MD. I was in the coronary care unit, and I remember that one night we had a patient who came in, and he had a heart attack. We made him comfortable. We monitored him closely, and then it kept coming back. And each time it came back, a little more of his heart was damaged. And we did all that we could to support him. As some of the best cardiologists in the world working with me on his case. But at a certain point, when they looked at what was going on, there was no technology at the time that could help him. All that we could do is keep him comfortable and hope for the best. And at that time, there was no restriction on doctors in training having sleep. So I was up all night with him, keeping him comfortable and being there. And then at about 6 a.m. the next day, he died. And this is the first time I'd ever been at the bedside of somebody who was going through this, where we couldn't actually help him any more than we were. And then he died. The nurses did their thing. They leave the room, and there it's just me and this patient. And I'm looking at the patient, and something that I ended up attributing to the fact that I had no sleep, and maybe I just had this hallucination or something. I saw energy around his body, and it was kind of a jiggling energy like you see on hot asphalt in the, if you're in a place and you're seeing something generating energy and moving. That's what I saw shimmering around his body. And after a few seconds, it just went straight up through the ceiling of the CCU and out. And that was it. And I was terrified to tell anybody about it, because we were very much evidence-based. A lot of that stuff was poo-pooed by the scientists. If God exists, well, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but I haven't seen the evidence. Yes, a lot of people would say that. He hasn't come to me and talked to me, so I don't believe in this. And so as an agnostic, I didn't know if I believed in it, but the first thing that I couldn't deny was a clear vision of a shimmering that left this body. And I asked the question to myself, did I just see a soul leave a body? And I conclude, okay, I can't tell anybody because I might end up in the mental hospital. And, they'll throw away the key and I'll be there. Oh, yeah, sure, you're a doctor. Well, okay, go back to bed. Go back to your room. No, but I really am a doctor. I've got to be. No, no, no. You get back in there. I had that recurrent dream that I would be accidentally confined forever. So I decided I couldn't tell anybody. So that was my first example of something that I couldn't explain with regular medical science. And as I went through my career, there were other things that I couldn't explain. There were patients who were so sick they couldn't have survived any, they were, very near the end. And yet, I remember one patient in particular, he was, this was later when I was a resident, medical resident. He had metastatic cancer. There was nothing more that could be done for the cancer. And his family was all around the bedside every day. There was, except for one family member who was a type A personality businessman in New York. And I had spoken with him a number of times to give him updates and said, he's not doing well and he's probably not going to live much longer. And he said, well, I'm way too busy. So you call me and tell me when the time is right and I'll come out. So one morning we go around on rounds, we see this patient in the morning and we could barely measure his blood pressure. And his kidneys were going into failure. His heart was going into failure. All the organ systems were shutting down. And I called his son and said, Mr. Smith, your dad, you told me to call when it's the time. Well, it's the time. And things are going south so fast here that I don't know if you're going to make it in time if you leave right now. He said, well, I'll give it a shot. I'm on my way. So I had also experienced this phenomenon where people going into a coma who come out of it can often report the exact words and treatments. And one of my nursing friends had an anaphylactic reaction and talked about an out-of-body experience where she could float up and she could see exactly the drugs being given to her in the IV bottle. And she knew exactly what the doctors were saying. And there was like this consciousness that had separated from the body and was observing. So whenever actually taking care of patients, whenever family were around and a patient was in a coma, whether it's medically induced or whatever their state was, I'd say talk to them as if they can hear every word. So you tell them about how much you love them. You can tell them about son John is on his way from New York. And I also told the patient that while he was in a coma. So what happened was John, the son from New York, comes out and he arrives 14 hours later. It was kind of a miracle that he could have made it that long. Everything was shutting down. I would have predicted he would have been dead in a few hours. John arrived. He had 2 hours at the bedside, and then his dad died. And I also gave him that message: talk to him as if he can hear you, because he probably can on some level. And it's as if the patient decided to wait till John got there. So I was beginning to see these things, and then I would see things where patients had really difficult, complicated diseases like sepsis and a really bad infection that gets out of control, and and again, it didn't seem like it was likely that they could survive, but then something kicked in and they survived. And again, it wasn't, we were already doing maximum stuff. We weren't preventing the bad things from showing up, but something else was. Something else was turning them around. And I started seeing more and more of that. So it was, and I had a few epiphanies during my residency. I remember one day, it was a Saturday, we were on call, and typically what we would do is send home as many of the patients as we could, so that we made room for new patients coming in. And we did that on a Saturday morning, and I'm looking at all these patients leaving, and I have this profound sense that I don't know what wellness is. If you ask people at that time, what is wellness, they would say it's the absence of disease. And yet none of these people were actually well. If any of them decided to stop in go by the ER, they'd get readmitted. They weren't well. We had treated their disease and they weren't well. So something was missing. And I didn't yet know, but it became a passion of mine, figuring out what is wellness. And this was way before the wellness activities were known, and meditation was known to be helpful. And so I was just being prepared for being open to all this. But the more I started doing things, the more I looked at things, I would see these situations that I couldn't explain by Western medicine, and yet I was afraid to talk about it too much, because people would roll their eyes and say, Henry, evidence-based. Where's your evidence? Don't tell me about this stuff.
Right. And that is the way that usually it still is today. I wouldn't even call it, the medical community is so very much evidence-based and kind of poo-poos other things that you actually that you dealt with, that I've dealt with, and other people have dealt with, that, like you're saying, it's almost like a miracle happens and there's no explanation for it, and we just kind of let it go, rather than knowing that there's another another source of healing going on and well-being that is always interacting with us.
Exactly. And I also, so one of the areas that I got interested in was the placebo effect and spontaneous remissions from really bad diseases that should have killed people. What was happening there? I mean, we were taught in science that you have you observe, you have a hypothesis that seems to explain what you're seeing, but a good scientist is open and curious and looking for the possibility that maybe there's something more complicated going on, or more profound, or more or deeper. And and I had one of the patients I saw in the medicine clinic. I'll try to be brief about describing it. I'm in the general medicine clinic. I'm a primary care doctor, which means I'm not trained in psychotherapy. I'm not trained in a lot of the specialty modalities. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but not the depth that the specialists have. So the medicine clinic patient comes in. I say, hi, I'm Dr. Kahn. What brings you in today? She was a 25-year-old young woman. She says, I'm suicidal. I need to be hospitalized. So that was the chief complaint. I said, okay, let me call the psych intake nurse, will come over and hear your story and escort you into the hospital. So while we're waiting, I say, so tell me what's been going on. She said, well, ever since, it was interesting, she also said, ever since the age of 4, I've been sad, and I've been told that I was depressed, and my parents would bring me to all sorts of different therapies, psychologists, psychiatrists, that put me through all of this over the years, and I would never received any kind of sustained relief. And they tried different therapies. They tried basically every medication out there for depression, and again, no sustained relief. I would just always revert back to this sad, depressed state. My latest psychiatrist was working under the, he said that I meet the pattern for some sort of hidden abuse. And Dr. Kahn, I know that this is a major problem for a lot of people and it's worth exploring, I suppose. But honestly, I have a really good memory, and there was no one who abused me. I could remember family, friends, strangers, neighbors, teachers, workmen, you name it, I can remember them, and nobody abused me. So 2 days ago on Wednesday, my psychiatrist, out of frustration, said, "Look, if you don't find the abuser, you are never going to get better." And so that's why I'm here today. And then the nurse arrived and off she goes. Monday, she's back in my clinic. So I say, well, how did that work? How did that go? She didn't say anything right away, but she reaches into her purse, takes out a piece of paper and rips it up. It was a prescription. She said, well, that was a bust. I mean, this psychiatrist that took care of me in the hospital, wanted to give me this medication. I had already been tried on this medication. They gave me a very long trial. They titrated up to maximum dose. They gave me a 9-month trial. It did nothing. And so we wrote the prescription anyway. So I'm obviously not going to go to this new guy. And the guy last week, I mean, but he should never say that to anybody under any circumstances, period. And so I'm not doing any of that. So what can you do for me, Dr. Kahn? And this is a moment when my instinct kicked in. And I said, well, here's my pen, and let's pretend, we're going to play a game here. Let's pretend that this pen is a magic wand. And as I wave it, your depression is 100% totally and forever gone, completely. How would your life change? She kind of looks down at the desk and says, I have no idea, no idea. And again, my instinct was working really well. I said nothing. And about 2 minutes go by, which is a strangely long amount of time when you're in an interaction, patient or client, professional interaction. But I shut up and let it and at 2 minutes she said, well, actually there are a couple of things. One is I really don't like my job. I've been thinking maybe I should go back to school. I just don't like it. There's no opportunity for advancement. It's kind of boring. Basically, I get donuts and coffee for the people who work there, and it's like, maybe I want to go back to school. And the second thing is I actually would like to have a real relationship with somebody. I mean, honestly, the guys I work with are such losers that if they were the only males left on the planet, I'd have nothing to do with them. And so I said, okay. And I started going into coaching mode instinctively. Well, what do you think your next step is? She said, I guess I can get some information about some places I might want to go for college. So we agreed that was her assignment for the week. She'd get some places and brochures. So she comes in that a week later with 3 brochures, and we also had an agreement that if she started slipping down the depression hole into suicidal thoughts again, she'd let me know right away. So anyway, a week later comes by, and she shows me the brochures, and I look through them all, and I say, all these look really interesting. Any stand out? And she points to one and said, well, I really like that one. I said, great. What's your next step? So she smiled for the first time and said, I guess I could apply. So we agreed to stay in touch. And a little bit of time goes by, and I'm thinking, okay, I haven't heard from her, so I'm going to check with her. But I go to my snail mail box in the clinic, and there's a letter from her. Dear Dr. Kahn, just wanted to give you an update of my status. I applied to that school. I got in. I met this guy. We're engaged. I'm not taking any meds. I'm not seeing any shrinks. Happiest I've ever been. Thanks. That was it.
Awesome.
So what I learned from that is something that Deb said earlier. We actually have everything we need inside of us. And all she needed was a shift in perspective. When she'd been labeled as a depressed person, and she played the role really well, playing that role and holding on to it until things got pretty outrageous. And she actually knew somewhere deep inside of her what she wanted, and it wasn't complicated. She didn't want to save the planet. She didn't want to, you know, find warp drive in physics, and I mean, those are all great goals too, but what she wanted was a normal life. And so she chose to go in that pathway, and in the process of thinking about, instead of only thinking about every single day her problem, she began to think about her solution, and very quickly, going in the direction of her solution, that's where she ended up. So that was the beginning of a series of events where I would watch patients heal. And at most, I was being a coach, holding open some space for them to help them find their own truth. I wasn't giving them their truth. It was more being a guide. You have strengths, you have resources, you have resilience. You know, honestly, she's bounced back. She, you know, hadn't killed herself yet. So all those times of despair, she actually was doing pretty well as a resilient person. She had survived that long, and she did the right thing to put herself in a safe place so she wouldn't act on the despair she experienced from the doctor.
What a story.
Yeah, but so I thank you. And I'll tell you how when I was in student health, and a lot of my resilience work started on this particular time. I was doing well, but I was starting to get some challenging things going on in the workplace. You know, administrative decision making that was suggesting maybe they didn't have my back after all, and I'd have to look at that. And then my 15-year-old teenage son was acting out in the way a lot of teenagers do, and it was pretty scary for me and my wife, not knowing what kind of trouble he was going to get into, and it was a super stressful time. But I actually used music, choral singing as my relief. And August 2007, our choir had been invited to sing the Mozart Coronation Mass in the Bay Area. And there was a basically summertime Mozart festival. Most of the time they did just orchestral music, but this year they were doing a choral piece. So I'm waiting to go on stage while all this other stuff is happening, and my friend Rick comes up. He's in the choir. It's about 5 minutes before stage time, and he says, "Hey Henry, how you doing?" I must have been pumping out negative energy, but he asked me, "How am I doing?" I said, "My son, work, you don't want to know, is kind of a mess right now." He said, "Well, let me walk you through an exercise my wife teaches." And I look at my watch and I say, "Exercise? What are you talking about? We're on stage in 5 minutes." He says, I know, but it's really simple. It's, you know, we're going to do some focusing on your heart. That's where it starts. And then I'm going to have you do some deep breaths, kind of like you do for singing, deep diaphragmatic breaths, a little slower, a little deeper than normal. And then once you get a nice rhythm going, I'm going to ask you to think of something you associate with feeling good. It could be a person, a place, an event, even a really good French fry that you knew you shouldn't have, but oh my God, it was so great. It doesn't matter. The idea is to bring that good feeling into you right now. And so I'm kind of thinking, okay, new agey thing, but there's now 4 minutes to stage time. whatever, you know, I had nothing else to do. So I said, fine, whatever. I said, great. Okay, Henry. So start breathing through your heart. So I'm waving my hands. Okay, we don't breathe through the heart. That's not how it works. Not going to work for me. I said, Henry, it's a metaphor. Can you imagine breathing into the lung tissue that surrounds the heart? So I'm kind of I was being a jerk actually, but I said, okay. And we're now 3 minutes before stage time. He said it was just going to be a short exercise. So he has me do that. I actually feel good doing the breathing because I'm not thinking about son and work and all that stuff. And then he says, think of something associated with feeling good. And I recall a perfect performance of a piece by Palestrina in Men's Glee Club. I went to college, Pomona College, and they had a great glee club. And it was a stunningly beautiful flow state performance. And when I remembered that, and I remembered what it was like to finish that and experience it, and I had just gone from the depths of despair to feeling really good in under 2 minutes. And so he pulls me out of it 30 seconds before stage time. He said, so how was that? I am so blown away. And that's how I started meditation. That's how I started. I had never meditated before because the story that I had come up with was, well, I'm too busy. It's the Vietnam War era. If I don't get into med school, they're going to draft me into, because I had a low draft number. So I was going to be either shooting people in Vietnam or going to med school. And I didn't have time to do this meditation stuff. And yet here I had done a 2 minute or less breathing and emotional refocusing. And so that became, as I got more into studying what that was about and what was happening, and understanding the physiologic changes and the emotional changes and the psychosocial changes, I started getting more interested in what positive psychology terms resilience. And it turns out to make, we talked about radical resilience. It's radical because it's so quick. It's like what was resilient about that patient with the suicidal thoughts was that all she had to do was shift her negative story. I'm a depressed person and I've been depressed all my life, to I have a future ahead of me and I want to pursue it. And it is that fast. And so, yes, you could do psychoanalysis for 4 times a week for 20 years, like Woody Allen did, and he still married his stepdaughter. So it's, anyway, that's the point here is, I'm not putting down if therapy is great for acceptance. Sometimes you want to understand a little better where these thoughts or difficulties came from, but at a certain place, what gets you out of it are these story shifts, these perspective shifts, mindset shifts. So that in my program of radical resilience, that's what I start with, the breathing and the emotional refocusing, and then go from there to the next step. I actually, before I could study the heart math related exercises that his wife taught, and learn about the biofeedback equipment to actually see your nervous system change on the screen and see the effects of it. Before I even got there, I had, if we have a little bit of time, I can tell a couple more patient care stories.
Well, actually, I want you to get to the Robbie story.
Okay.
Because
so I'll jump ahead to the Robbie story.
Yeah.
The hints about in 2007 that the workplace wasn't necessarily going to continue forever kind of came true in 2011. My boss decided that it was time for me to go. He was kind of narcissistic, like some people in our lives these days. Anyway, he did not give me any way to fix the problem. He wanted me to do things that weren't actually legal, and in terms of notification and about patients, students. And so I held my ground and protected my students, knowing that I was putting my job at risk. And I am happy to say I stayed in the integrity of doing what was right for the students. But he wanted me gone, so he gave me 6 months to look around, and I did, and I didn't, and I actually got nudged out. But several things happened. One, there was one of my friends said, "Congratulations, now you can do more of this resiliency work. You'll be more free to do that." And and then there was also this voice in my head. I've had a negative voice all my life. Well, that you was stupid, or you were dumb to do that, or you shouldn't have done that, or you're not actually good enough to do this, or all that stuff. This was a voice that said, "We're not quite sure what you didn't get about the year 2010, where my boss was acting out and being very difficult. But we made it so that you cannot stay anymore. You've been in boot camp, but now we need you on the front lines." And those were the words that popped into my head. And I didn't quite know where that came from. But it was a message that turned out to be true. I needed to be on the front lines. In fact, what I'm doing for the front lines right now with healthcare workers is trying to give them information about this radical resilience approach so that they can step out of their suffering and keep on going, because they're the only ones who are between us and the grave when it comes to the pandemic. So it's really important to activate that in the healthcare providers so that they keep going. And I'll get a lot of inspiration just watching some of the news shows about people in impossible situations who keep on going and keep digging deeper and keep getting creative. And it's about resilience. And so in my process of, well, what's next in my transition, I started looking into all sorts of coaching programs and getting more and more information on what worked. And finally, one of the programs I signed up for was storytelling. That's a work in progress, because most of the storytelling stuff in my program was, how do you tell your story in 3 minutes? So I need a little work on that still. But anyway, this particular storytelling coach, Bo Eason is his name, challenged us to tell the story that you don't want to tell. Tell the story that makes you tear up. And you saw me maybe, and that wasn't fake. I teared up maybe a little bit when I was starting to tell when Robbie was dead, when I found out Robbie was dead. So I said, okay, well, let me tell the story about Robbie. And so if I were going to tell a story about Robbie, what would be the most important thing? So I went through the characteristics of Robbie. Well, he was always kind, always happy, always gentle, playful, happy, you name it. He always had that positive energy. And he also had forgiveness. He never was angry with me for being gone. And he had this, and that unconditional love. And I'm listing all these things. He even had something that I think is close to equanimity. People would laugh at him and he'd join in their laughter. And I say, I'm looking at this and it looks like Robbie was enlightened. And I get this voice in my head, crystal clear. Took you long enough. I said, what? Robbie? Yeah, took you long enough. It's Robbie, and let me go through a few things, and I'll tell you the most important part of that story, what he went through to convince me that he's been with me. I had gone to a leadership training program, interestingly enough. I was sent there by my boss shortly before he nudged me out. And we had an executive coach for each of us, and we really bonded well. And she revealed that she also was an a neuro-linguistic programming expert. She actually trained with the people who first founded that. And she invited me, would you like me to do an exercise for you to help you through the struggles of, you know, this transition you're now in? I said, great, yeah. So she said, stand up, close your eyes, which I did. And she says, I want you to take your hands and imagine that you, first of all, tell me where you feel the most tension. I said, solar plexus. Okay, good. Imagine you could take both of your hands, put them inside your body, reach in and pull out whatever is the source of this tension. And then I want you to open your eyes and tell me what you imagine you see in your hands. And so I said, wow, this is really interesting. I see two hearts. One's beating and one is not. She said, do you have any idea what that's about? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm getting this sense it's about my brother Robbie. And I told her my Robbie story that I just told everybody here. And maybe it's I'm alive and he's dead. I'm not quite sure. Okay, so first thing Robbie says, after took you long enough, he said, I want to go through a few things that you've experienced. First of all, let's talk about the NLP exercise. You got it half right. It was about me, but here's the part you didn't get, and I want you to get it. And this was it. I have been and always will be with you, dead or alive. So thanks, Robbie. So here is this geeky science kid turned into a doctor, going through a transition, not quite knowing where the transition is going to lead me, but getting into coaching and other ways of connecting with people and helping them find their own resilience points and their own strengths and their own ability to heal, and helping them with that. That's my transition. And there's my brother. Interestingly enough, if I could speak like Robbie, it would be precise. So I'm working on that too. So I could tell everything I told you in 5 minutes instead of an hour. But thanks for your patience and listening. But that he went through a number of other things that had also been mysteries to me. Mm-hmm. Like when I almost drowned at age 17 because I was strong and I was doing body surfing and I had absolutely no judgment when the big waves were hitting one day in Santa Monica Beach. I went into the water anyway. They were way too powerful. The undertow was too powerful to me to actually get out of the water, because as soon as I lifted one leg, it almost pulled me off my feet and I almost drowned. But there were voices in there. There was a voice that said, don't panic. And guided me not only to how to survive the wave that, knocked me out, knocked me down, and I ended up swimming the wrong direction. So I'm swimming, looking for oxygen, and I hit the sand instead of the air. But I immediately knew which way to go. So, one of that metaphor is sometimes you actually have to hit bottom before you can find which way to go. So I hit bottom literally, put my feet between my two hands that were digging into the sand, and I, used the full strength of my legs to rocket me up to the air. And I still had the challenge of swimming in without getting caught in the riptide. So I also got guided to that. And anyway, that was Robbie. And I could keep going on telling other stories, but I think those are the most important ones.
Yeah, I think they're amazing stories that you have in different ways. But the Robbie story, what so fascinated me was him explaining what his death was about to you. And
yeah.
I think that's very important to share. His whole life and has helped you with understanding what radical resilience is, so that you can start seeing it in other areas, because he showed that to you. And then his death story also plays into that.
Yes. Thanks for reminding me about that. When we got to that part of the story, he said, I also wanted to tell you about why I died at age 14. First of all, I mean, from a medical standpoint, there's a condition called um, cardiac cushion defect. It's a weakening of the parts of the heart that hold down the valves. And sometimes as early as age 14, the heart valves can fail all at once. And at that time, there was no possibility of treatment. And so he became blue because the blood was mixing, it wasn't oxygenating. And so what he said to me in this revelation was, I needed to go. I've shoved mom in a way that I knew was serious enough that I'd be removed, because I knew neither you nor mom would let go of me if I had stayed at the house. I had felt guilty for years not being able to come up with a solution. You could have hired someone to be, to help him, or watch Robbie if he was getting too aggressive. He said, I needed to go. It was my time. And here's why. Because my other mission for this life was to inspire Uncle Bob, my mother's brother, to take a small um, uh, institution that had a very small budget. It was called Exceptional Children's Foundation. It was a nonprofit. And he took it into a multi-million-dollar business that basically focused on teaching programs and daycare programs and education programs to teach people with Down syndrome how to live a pretty normal life. They are gentle, kind, wonderful people, and they can have a life too, and they can fall in love, and they can get married. And so my mission was accomplished. Uncle Bob was taking over. He was building this thing, and my mission was over. But I will always be here for you. So he says hi to everybody on this call. And he's wishing you all well, because you all have these abilities within you to accomplish great things.
Everyone does. What
Everyone.
a what a fascinating story. And it was God this morning that reminded me. He said, Henry needs to tell the Robbie story, because the radical resilience is so important to help people understand. But the other piece of it is understanding that the mystery of life, that we tend to perceive things in a way not really understanding the expansiveness of God's ways. And and so understanding that Robbie had a mission of coming here, and that the way he decided to complete that, we would look at it, you looked at it, your mom looked at, that it erect havoc in your heart, to watch the way that happened, not realizing that he played a role in creating the ending for his life. And it was all in divine order. And that he's always with you.
Yes. And it was so profound that it drives me now. I seek to be the best. I seek to be, and if my workplace doesn't support that, then it's time to transition to other things. I'm still a doctor. I still teach. I'd love to be able to teach this radical resilience to healthcare workers, and that's my goal right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how do they save themselves so that they can then teach and save others, their
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, their patients. Tapping into those strengths in this pandemic and all the other stuff happening along with it is really what it's about. We all have these interconnections. It's the interconnections to energy in the universe that for the geeky science people out there are still not so sure about God or Jesus or the named entities. There's also the universe. There's source. There's energy. There's quantum mechanics. all of these actually come to the same place. It's uh, as a species, I believe we need to evolve to a higher level of consciousness so we actually do care about each other.
Hmm.
Imagine that. Imagine if we had one day where people pledged to be kind to somebody else. One day, completely transform the universe
Hmm.
of our life here. Uh, and for those of people who hate, um, there might be someone in that race who is, learning some bad thing right now, who, if given the chance, will find the cure of the disease that you're going to die from and allow you to live much longer. We never know, and you can't tell.
Hmm.
You may think you can, but what if you gave them? What if everybody had a chance to be at their best and find their best and be guided by whatever they needed to be guided by? That would be awesome. What a
Hmm.
wonderful world.
What a beautiful prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. Henry, this has been delightful sharing you and your story with our audience. And your story is so powerful. And your story about Robbie is what brings it all together about radical resilience, because that's what he's teaching us, is that he's still alive.
Yes.
It's a Jesus story. He's still alive, and that you're an eternal being and have so much more to you than you could ever imagine, of really knowing who you are. And so I'm really happy and grateful that you're here and able to share um, this beautiful journey. And I wish you well as you go out into the world and continue to teach about radical resilience. So, can you please tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, well, there's a lot of things being worked on right now. There is a program that is new called let's see if I get it right, International Academy of Self Mastery, uh, and it's that's sort of a startup. There'll be an introductory course put on that for free about radical resilience. It's designed for healthcare workers, and if you're a healthcare worker listening to this, it's specifically designed for you. But I'll give you a little hint: it's universal. There is nothing about that is only applicable to healthcare professionals. And then I am in the process of working on the next step, which is a full deeper dive course in resilience to really hone in on the skills you need to shift your focus, shift your mindset, shift your story, if necessary, shift your belief, so that because we're not here to prove that suffering is happening. We're here to rise above the suffering. And the story is not very interesting. The story is much less interesting if tell a bad boss story. Lots of people have that. Okay, that doesn't help me much. Uh, People would say, what helps is what did you do to get through it? How did you transition through that? And I think that's what's really important. I really appreciate, Deb, your guidance. Most of the time, in most situations, it's been a challenge to tell the Robbie story, and a lot of places don't like it because it's too sad or whatever. But there's a lot of hope on the other side of it. It is how the universe works. Robbie isn't gone, and neither are my other relatives. And my I'm the only one of the five of us. My mother, father, and the three sons. I'm the one remaining, but all of them were superheroes, and I can see that now. It may not have seemed like it at the time, but they all taught me lessons that make me stronger. And so
Beautiful.
it's So we were destined to meet, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. So my so I have a sort of a nothing special Facebook page. I am working on having a website. It's not yet ready. I am working on a number of other things, and these the unfolding of these courses is another way that I'm going to see if I can do this. But an event, and I also have coaching. So I have a high performance coaching that is positive psychology based, and is the ultimate in resilience is that you're constantly reaching to be better at something, no matter how good you are at something. Going to the next level, reaching for that next level, has been shown in research to make you more resilient. And then if that's more than what people need, I can tailor make a coaching program for people to try to match what they can afford and what they can do to get the basics.
Mm-hmm. But you do have an email that people can reach out to you. So why don't you share your email address with them?
Yes. So the email is Henry, HENRY, J, the initial, like John. So henryjkahn, K is in King, A is in Alex, H is in Henry, N is in Nancy, at iCloud.com. And since I managed to get huge amounts of email, it would be helpful as I, put something in the subject line. I heard about you on Angel Heart Radio, or I heard about you from Deb Goldberg, so that I as I get my act together on all this social media stuff and what the universe of the digital worlds, and being a Zoom novice here, learning every day a little bit more. I think I'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But my strengths are on the one. I would say mostly in the one-to-one work.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing your light and love and wisdom to all of us. It has been a great pleasure having you here today. And I also wanted to mention that Saturday I will be holding a masterclass at 2:00 p.m. Eastern, and it is on balancing your energy and staying in vibrational alignment. So if anybody's interested, you can reach out to enlightenworld.online for that for registering. And when in doubt, never underestimate the power of prayer. You are being listened to and heard throughout the universe, and it always responds with infinite and eternal love. Remember to go inside and listen for the whispers of heaven. I love you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Angel Heart Radio programs should not be used to replace your legal or medical advice, nor your own sound judgment. In truth, nothing can dim your magnificence. You are a divine spark, a universal light. You are here on purpose. You are part of a divine plan, and it's our joy to support you. We're here to celebrate you. Welcome to Angel Heart Radio. Powered by love, Angel Heart Radio is brought to you by AngelLight777.com.
Great news, everyone. Angel Heart Radio is now live streaming on our Facebook page, and we have a fully searchable, brilliant podcast platform for you at angelheartlisten.com.